300 men, one king, an empire at their gates. At Thermopylae, courage became a weapon no army could crush. The wind howled through the narrow mountain pass, whipping dust and fragments of stone into the eyes of the few warriors who stood defiantly in the dawn light. Across the ridge, a shimmering sea of humanity stretched as far as the eye could see. Xerxes' Persian army, vast and relentless, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, advancing with the certainty of an unstoppable tide. And there, at the choke point of Thermopylae, stood only 300 Spartans, 300 men, against the world. It was 480 BC, a year that would forever echo in the annals of history. As the first rays of sunlight painted the rugged cliffs in hues of gold and crimson, King Leonidas of Sparta surveyed his men, each warrior a picture of hardened resolve, polished bronze armor catching the light, spears poised like a forest of metallic pines. Their shields bore the lambda, L, the emblem of Laconia, a symbol of duty, courage, and sacrifice. Behind them, the pass funneled through jagged cliffs and a narrow coastal strip where any numerical advantage of the Persians would be nullified. The question lingers, even today, how could such a handful of men stand against an empire? What drove them to embrace near-certain death with a grim smile and unwavering resolve? The answer lies not only in military training, but in the very soul of Sparta itself, a society forged for war, where valor and honor outweighed life itself. Imagine the first clash, the thunder of thousands of hooves against stone, the hiss of Persian arrows like a black rain, and the Spartan phalanx shoulder to shoulder, their bronze shields interlocked, moving as one organism, a living wall of discipline, sound, smell, and fury combined, the metallic tang of blood, the acrid smoke of fires, the cry of men and horses, all under a burning sun that rose as if to witness this extraordinary spectacle. But Thermopylae was more than a battle. It was a crucible of human will. For the Persians, it was a path to conquest, a show of imperial might meant to subdue Greece. For the Spartans, it was an act of defiance, a delay of inevitability, a chance to inspire every free Greek city-state to rise in defense of their homeland. Leonidas, fully aware of the odds, had embraced the strategy of the narrow pass, to trade numbers for terrain, to make every step forward a test of Persian resolve, and to turn an overwhelming invasion into a narrative of heroism. Even in the quiet moments before the first trumpet sounded, there were whispers and small rituals. Soldiers adjusted the leather straps of their greaves, polished their spearheads, and uttered prayers to Ares and Artemis, seeking strength beyond the flesh and iron. The air was taut, electric with anticipation, every heartbeat a drumbeat counting down the moments to destiny. Some men thought of home, their wives, their sons, their city-state, but duty was a louder call. Duty and honor. Thermopylae, though narrow, was a stage for a drama that would resonate for millennia. It was not merely about survival, nor about glory. It was a statement that courage, discipline, and strategy could defy even the largest force the world had ever seen. And indeed, for 3 days, this handful of warriors did exactly that, holding back an empire, turning the tide of history in ways that would ripple far beyond the rocky cliffs of central Greece. For modern viewers, the story of Thermopylae is more than legend. It is a study in leadership, resilience, and the complex calculus of warfare. It's the clash of cultures, Greek freedom versus Persian Empire, the human drama of ordinary men achieving extraordinary feats. And as we walk through this tale, imagine standing among those Spartans, the weight of the shield, the tension in the spear, the rhythm of thousands of footsteps pounding in the narrow pass, and the knowledge that each moment could be your last. Before we continue into the heart of this epic, make sure to hit subscribe, like, and share, because the story of Thermopylae is not just history. It's a masterclass in courage under fire, and you won't want to miss a single moment of it. Wide shots of the pass at dawn, long shadows cast by jagged cliffs, soldiers marching into position, banners fluttering in the wind, and the distant shimmer of Persian ranks all set the stage. The sun climbs higher, illuminating the tension, the strategy, and the stakes. This is Thermopylae. This is where the impossible begins. To understand why Thermopylae became one of the most legendary battles in human history, We must first step back several decades to the simmering tensions that set the stage for conflict between East and West. The Persian Empire, under the Achaemenid dynasty, had already expanded across vast swaths of Asia, swallowing kingdoms and city-states into its imperial fold. By the time Xerxes I ascended the throne in 486 BC, Persia was not merely a kingdom, it was a colossus, stretching from the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, commanding an army said to number in the hundreds of thousands. But expansion bred resistance. The Ionian Greek city-states along the coast of Asia Minor had long chafed under Persian domination. Their revolt in 499 BC, known as the Ionian Revolt, had been crushed, but the memory lingered, a potent reminder that the Greeks were unwilling subjects. For the Persians, consolidating control over the Greek peninsula was both a strategic and symbolic necessity. To subdue Greece would mean securing the western flank of the empire and demonstrating that no rebellion would go unpunished. On the other side, the Greek city-states were a mosaic of fiercely independent polities, each with its own government, culture, and military system. Athens, with its growing naval power, championed democracy and civic participation, while Sparta, isolated on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, was the embodiment of militaristic rigor and societal discipline. The two, along with other Greek allies, had previously united against Persian aggression, most notably at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, where Athenian forces had stunned the world with a decisive victory over a Persian expeditionary force. By 480 BC, the Persian objective was clear: vengeance, conquest, and the expansion of imperial prestige. Xerxes envisioned a march through Greece that would leave nothing but submission in its wake. Yet he faced a landscape unlike any other, fractured yet fiercely independent. Mountainous terrain favoring defensive warfare, and people willing to fight not just for land, but for ideals. The Greek response was, in itself, an extraordinary testament to diplomacy and unity under duress. Recognizing the Persian threat, a council of city-states convened at Corinth, debating whether to stand and fight or flee and preserve their homes. Sparta emerged as the natural choice to lead the defense of the narrow pass at Thermopylae. Why? Geography. The pass, a thin corridor between mountains and sea, could neutralize Persia's overwhelming numerical advantage. It was a battlefield where discipline and tactical skill could outweigh sheer numbers. King Leonidas of Sparta, renowned for his martial skill and unflinching courage, was tasked with leading this expedition. According to the historian Herodotus, he was accompanied by a small contingent of Spartan warriors, men chosen not only for strength, but for character, men who epitomized the Spartan ideal. Their mission? Hold the pass long enough to allow other Greek forces to mobilize, delaying Xerxes' advance and buying precious time for defensive preparations across the Peloponnese. It is crucial to note that this was more than a simple clash of armies. It was a collision of cultures. Persia represented a sprawling, hierarchical empire, one in which loyalty was enforced through fear and wealth, soldiers recruited from distant lands, fighting under banners of imperial grandeur. Greece, in contrast, valued autonomy, civic participation, and personal honor. Every hoplite, every citizen soldier, was fighting not just for survival, but for the principles of his city-state. This ideological divide made Thermopylae more than a military engagement. It became a symbolic confrontation, one that would resonate in Greek collective memory for centuries. The stakes could not have been higher. For Persia, failure meant embarrassment and the possibility of revolt in newly conquered territories. For Greece, failure threatened the loss of homeland, culture, and political independence. The ensuing campaign was thus a chess match on a colossal scale, with generals, kings, and ordinary soldiers alike playing roles whose consequences extended far beyond their lifetimes. Visualizing this context, one can imagine maps unfolding, the Persian heartlands stretching across continents, the Greek city-states like a constellation of fortresses, islands and peninsulas resisting encroachment. Trade routes shimmered along the coastlines, resources flowed and were taxed, and spies and scouts carried intelligence across both sides. Rumors and propaganda traveled faster than armies, shaping morale before the first sword was even drawn. Anecdotes illuminate the human dimension. Xerxes, as legend recounts, often consulted seers and priests, anxious about omens and the will of the gods. Greek city-states debated endlessly over contribution and strategy, some fearing Persian wrath more than defeat. And through it all, Leonidas prepared, understanding that even a few hundred men could alter the course of history if positioned wisely and led with conviction. Thus, when the Persians finally arrived at Thermopylae in 480 BC, it was not merely a battle waiting to happen. It was the climax of decades of tension, political maneuvering, and cultural defiance. What followed would be 3 days that crystallized the ideals of courage, discipline, and sacrifice, shaping the narrative of Western civilization for generations. The morning before the first clash at Thermopylae was deceptively serene. The pass, a jagged wedge of land squeezed between the mountains and the shimmering Aegean Sea, seemed almost peaceful under the amber dawn. Yet the quiet was a fragile mask, concealing the tension that coursed through every Spartan heart and echoed in the restless movements of Persian scouts beyond the hills. Preparation for battle was not merely a matter of sharpening spears and polishing shields. It was a ritual, a psychological and logistical orchestration designed to transform fear into focus, numbers into strategy, and ordinary soldiers into instruments of war. For the Spartans, military readiness was a way of life. From childhood, boys endured the agog, the brutal Spartan training system that forged endurance, obedience, and unflinching courage. By adulthood, Leonidas's men were not just warriors. They were living embodiments of discipline. Each hoplite carried a heavy bronze shield, a spear roughly 7 to 8 feet long, and a short sword, all tools that would function as extensions of the body in the phalanx formation. The phalanx itself, a dense interlocking wall of shields and projecting spears, was a marvel of coordination and collective strength. One misstep could unravel the entire formation. Perfection was the price of survival. In contrast, the Persian forces were a sprawling mosaic of nationalities, fighting under the banners of an empire. Their army was diverse: archers from Syria, cavalry from Media, infantry from various subject lands. While they outnumbered the Greeks perhaps 100-fold, their cohesion was often inconsistent. This disparity was exactly what Leonidas hoped to exploit. He knew that the narrow terrain of Thermopylae could reduce the Persian advantage to near irrelevance, forcing Xerxes' forces into a constrained bottleneck where discipline and skill could triumph over mass. Logistics were meticulously planned. Greek forces fortified the pass with natural barriers, clearing areas of loose rock that could trip an advancing army and identifying choke points where a few men could hold against many. Scouts were dispatched to monitor Persian movements, while messengers ensured constant communication with allied Greek contingents positioned elsewhere. Even the simplest details, the angle of a spear, the spacing of shields, the order of units, were calculated to maximize efficiency and effectiveness. Beyond physical preparation, psychological readiness was paramount. Leonidas understood that morale could tip the balance in such a high-stakes engagement. Before the battle, he addressed his men with speeches designed to steal their hearts. He invoked the Spartan code of honor, the legacy of ancestors, and the glory of dying for one's homeland. The Spartans responded with ritualized cries, the clanging of bronze shields, and the synchronized stamping of feet, a rhythmic, almost ceremonial affirmation of courage. Some historians speculate that these psychological preparations were as critical as any tactical maneuver. A disciplined mind was as formidable as a well-aimed spear. Rituals reinforced unity and purpose. Priests and soothsayers offered prayers to Ares, god of war, and Artemis, protector of soldiers. Sacrifices were made, symbols were raised, and the lambda on every shield became a visual testament to their shared mission. Spartan culture dictated that fear was not denied but channeled. Anxiety became focus, hesitation became precision, and the sense of impending death became a source of valor rather than panic. The Greeks' careful study of terrain offered another advantage. The coastal road along Thermopylae narrowed to a width barely enough to deploy a few ranks of infantry side by side. Behind them, sheer cliffs rose dramatically, making flanking nearly impossible. The sea to their right left no room for retreat. Leonidas positioned his forces with these constraints in mind, creating a natural funnel that forced the Persians to attack in waves. Archers and javelin throwers were stationed to harry the enemy as they approached, while the main phalanx would deliver crushing spear charges at precisely calculated moments. Even everyday minutiae became matters of strategy. Soldiers inspected armor for gaps, tested spear tips, and measured stride distances to ensure phalanx cohesion. Civilians in nearby villages observed the Spartan camp with awe and trepidation, understanding that what was about to unfold could decide the fate of all of Greece. Children peered from behind walls, women whispered prayers into the wind, and merchants quietly stashed valuables, knowing that the Persian advance could reach their homes within days. Spartan preparation at Thermopylae also highlights the contrast between contemporary battles. While other Greek city-states relied on larger formations or guerrilla tactics, the Spartans' strength was precision and discipline. They were not overwhelmed through numbers, but through unity, strategy, and sheer willpower. Modern military historians often cite Thermopylae as a case study in how terrain, morale, and elite training can turn a minor force into a strategic linchpin. As the sun climbed higher, the final moments of readiness took shape. Spears were planted in the ground for inspection, shields were oiled and gleaming, and ranks were straightened with near-religious precision. Leonidas walked among his men, silent but watchful, his presence a constant reassurance. The Spartans knew what lay ahead, yet they bore no hesitation. Their preparation was complete, not merely of body and weapon, but of mind, spirit, and collective purpose. And just beyond the cliffs, the murmur of the Persian army grew louder, the tremor of hooves and the rustle of armor reaching the ears of those awaiting the first strike. Thermopylae was ready to become a crucible, and every careful preparation would soon be tested under fire. The morning of confrontation at Thermopylae broke with a deceptive calm, the sea whispering against the rocks, the wind stirring the edges of Spartan banners. And then the Persian tide arrived. From the north, a seemingly endless line of infantry, cavalry, and chariots surged forward, a living river of bronze, iron, and banners stretching beyond the horizon. Xerxes himself, mounted on a golden throne atop a hill, observed his army's advance, the sun glinting off spears and armor, turning the vast host into a glittering, almost divine spectacle of power. King Leonidas, standing shoulder to shoulder with his men, gave a subtle nod, and the Spartans braced, shields interlocked, spears at the ready. The battle was not a chaotic melee yet. It was an orchestration, each movement deliberate, each phalanx a wall of disciplined intent. For the first time in history, the sheer psychology of defense, the knowledge that retreat was not an option, would collide with overwhelming force. Phase 1. The initial clash. The first Persian waves hit the narrow pass, their arrows blotting out sunlight, whistling like storms of iron. Yet the Spartans, their shields forming an unbroken front, absorbed the barrage. The spears jabbed outward with terrifying precision, and the enemy faltered, crushed not by numbers but by cohesion. Horses reared against the barricade of bronze, foot soldiers tripped over uneven rock, and Xerxes' archers found the dense formation almost impervious. The air was thick with tension, the metallic clang of shields striking each other, the cries of men and animals mingling with the hiss of arrows, the sweat and dust stinging eyes and nostrils. In this controlled chaos, Leonidas exemplified leadership. Every command was economical but decisive, every shift of the phalanx calculated to maximize effect, while minimizing exposure. Persian officers quickly realized that Thermopylae was no ordinary obstacle. It was a choke point where numbers alone could not guarantee victory. Phase 2. Persian adaptation. By the second day, Xerxes' forces began to adapt. They tried flanking maneuvers, sending detachments over the mountain paths in an attempt to encircle the Greeks. Spartan scouts had anticipated such movements, yet even their legendary discipline was tested. Leonidas, informed of these maneuvers, deployed a smaller force of Thespians and other allied Greeks to hold the high ground. Every moment was a test of nerve. Even the elite Spartan phalanx could not cover every ridge, and the knowledge of encirclement loomed like a shadow over morale. The battle's physicality was relentless. Spears struck with the force of a battering ram, shields splintered under the weight of repeated blows, and blood mixed with sweat and dust to form a grim paste on the rocks. Soldiers on both sides moved in a deadly ballet of thrusts, parries, and staggering pushes. One Spartan anecdote, recorded by Herodotus, tells of a warrior who, in a desperate counterattack, killed dozens of Persians before succumbing, his body still wedged between the enemy. A final act of defiance. Phase 3. The tide turns. The crucial turning point came on the third day. A local Greek named Ephialtes, motivated by promises of Persian reward, revealed a hidden mountain path that bypassed the main pass, allowing the Persians to outflank Leonidas's position. It was a devastating blow. Encirclement threatened not only the physical integrity of the Spartan line, but also the psychological resolve that had held the battle together. Realizing the inevitability of confrontation, Leonidas made a fateful decision. He dismissed most of the Greek contingents, leaving only his 300 Spartans and a few 100 allies, including the Thespians and Thebans, to make the final stand. This act of sacrifice was both tactical and symbolic, delaying the Persians to buy time for the rest of Greece while cementing the Spartans' place in legend. The narrow pass, once a weapon against the enemy, would now become a tomb for courage itself. Phase 4. The last stand-in. The final hours, the Spartans fought with unparalleled ferocity. Arrows, javelins, and swords clashed against shields and armor. The ground became slick with blood, the rocks littered with the fallen. Herodotus recounts that the Spartans made a circle at the center of the pass, shields outward, spears bristling like a metallic forest, each man aware that this formation might be their last. The cries of Persian soldiers, once confident, became tinged with fear and frustration. Even Xerxes reportedly watched in awe, perhaps disbelief, at the courage of so few against so many. Sensory details define this phase: the smell of singed leather, the metallic tang of blood, the roar of combat mingling with the unbroken chanting of Spartan war cries. Spears snapped, helmets dented, and men were crushed under their own phalanx when the enemy pushed too hard, yet the line held. Every Spartan, every ally, fought not just for life, but for the principles of their homeland. Phase 5. Death and legacy. Inevitably, the Spartans fell. Leonidas himself was killed, his body surrounded by enemies, yet even in death, the impact of his leadership was evident. Persian forces surged through the pass only after exhausting themselves against the unyielding line. The physical toll was immense. Herodotus estimates that thousands of Persian soldiers were killed or wounded before the final breakthrough, while the Spartans and their allies paid with their lives. The immediate aftermath of battlefields was staggering. The bodies of Spartans were left as a warning, their shields raised against the rocks, a silent testament to sacrifice. Persian troops, though victorious, were physically and psychologically drained. Thermopylae had not stopped Xerxes, but it had delayed him, disrupted his momentum, and crucially, forged a legend that would resonate across Greece and beyond. The battle was over, yet its impact rippled. Greek city-states, inspired by the courage at Thermopylae, mobilized more decisively, preparing for naval confrontations at Salamis and land defenses at Plataea. Leonidas's strategy, sacrificing a few to protect the many, using terrain to compensate for numerical inferiority, would become a case study in military history for centuries. Visual cues for this dramatic sequence include aerial reconstructions of the pass, waves of Persian troops advancing, close-ups of Spartan phalanxes, bloodied armor, and weapons jutting from the rocky ground. The light changes from the glare of morning to the shadowed chaos of battle, emphasizing the relentless progression of time and the growing intensity of combat. Thermopylae, in its violence, discipline, and ultimate sacrifice, became more than a military engagement. It became a crucible in which the ideals of courage, strategy, and collective resolve were burned into history. The silence that followed the final clash at Thermopylae was deafening. Where moments before there had been the thunder of hooves, the clash of bronze, and the roar of men, now only the wind whispered through the narrow pass. Dust and smoke hung in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Rocks were slick with crimson, broken shields and shattered spears littered the ground, and the bodies of fallen Spartans and Persian soldiers alike marked the landscape in grim testament to the ferocity of the fight. For the Persians, victory came at a cost. Their immense numbers could not prevent exhaustion, disorganization, and heavy casualties. Thousands of soldiers lay wounded or dead along the pass, the very terrain that had initially been a trap for the Spartans now claiming its toll on the victors. Xerxes' army had won the ground but had lost time, momentum, and perhaps a sense of invincibility. The sheer courage displayed by the Spartans impressed even the Persian king. According to Herodotus, Xerxes remarked that, "Never before had he seen men fight with such determination, nor met an enemy so resolute in the face of overwhelming odds." Greek observers, both those who had withdrawn and the scattered civilians watching from nearby heights, were struck by the enormity of the sacrifice. Word of the Spartans' stand spread quickly through the city-states. In Athens, citizens who had fled the advancing Persian army learned that a mere 300 men had held a vast imperial host for 3 days, buying critical time to organize defenses, fortify cities, and prepare the navy for the coming battles at Salamis. For the Greeks, Thermopylae became a symbol of hope, a vivid demonstration that courage, unity, and strategic use of terrain could challenge even the most formidable force. The physical aftermath of the battle was staggering. The pass had become a scarred battlefield. Craters where boulders had been rolled down the cliffs, pools of blood mingled with sand and dust, and the clang of abandoned weapons rang hollow in the wind. Persian engineers worked to remove obstacles, rebuild the path, and clear corpses, tasks that consumed days, even with the army's vast manpower. Meanwhile, the Spartans' bodies were eventually recovered by their fellow Greeks, their shields restored as symbols of honor and remembrance. Leonidas' sacrifice became the focal point of mourning and veneration, his grave marking the ultimate act of leadership and devotion to the polis. Psychologically, the battle left deep impressions on both sides. Persian soldiers, accustomed to near-automatic victories across vast territories, had faced the unyielding resistance of men willing to die rather than yield. This shaken confidence would echo through subsequent engagements, influencing Xerxes' strategy in both overconfidence and caution. For the Greeks, Thermopylae's immediate impact was galvanizing. City-states that had previously been hesitant to commit forces to a collective defense now recognized the necessity of unity against a common enemy. Morale, previously fragile, was bolstered by the demonstration that courage and discipline could defy even an empire. Casualties were immense for the Spartans and their allies. Every Spartan fell, along with hundreds of Thespians and other volunteers, their deaths a calculated and unavoidable aspect of Leonidas' strategy. Persian losses, while far higher in absolute numbers, were proportionally smaller. Yet the experience of fighting in the narrow pass left lasting strain on the army's cohesion. Medical care was rudimentary. Many wounded perished due to exposure or infection. The human cost was palpable, but so too was the enduring legacy of valor and sacrifice. Strategically, Thermopylae achieved its purpose. By delaying Xerxes' advance, the Spartans allowed the Greek city-states critical time to mobilize naval forces under Athenian leadership, construct fortifications, and plan coordinated resistance. The stand at Thermopylae was thus not a tactical victory in the traditional sense, but a decisive strategic maneuver, demonstrating the interplay between sacrifice, terrain, and the broader campaign. Visual cues in the aftermath capture both devastation and reverence. Wide shots show the rocky, blood-stained pass, broken armor scattered across the ground, and Persian troops moving cautiously through the terrain they had struggled to conquer. Close-ups highlight the Spartan shields, some still upright, bearing the iconic lambda, a silent testament to courage. The light shifts from the harsh glare of battle to a softer, reflective glow, signaling mourning and contemplation. Villagers and Greek forces alike survey the pass, their faces marked with awe, grief, and newfound resolve. Thermopylae's immediate aftermath, then, was a complex interplay of physical destruction, psychological resonance, and strategic consequence. The Spartans' sacrifice had bought time, inspired unity, and altered the trajectory of the Persian campaign. Though the pass was now under enemy control, the story of those who fell would echo far beyond its rocky confines, shaping the collective memory of Greece and immortalizing the ideals of duty, courage, and sacrifice. Thermopylae's immediate aftermath was only the beginning of its enduring influence on Greek history and, indeed, on the broader tapestry of civilization. Though the Spartans and their allies had perished, the battle became a catalyst for strategic, political, and cultural shifts that shaped the outcome of the Persian invasion and left an indelible mark on Western memory. Strategically, the three-day stand achieved its purpose. By delaying Xerxes' advance, the Spartans bought critical time for the Greek city-states to fortify key positions, most notably the narrow naval approaches near Salamis. Athens, evacuated in anticipation of Persian occupation, coordinated a fleet capable of meeting the invaders on the water. The Greek defensive network, including fortified positions at Plataea and naval contingents across the Aegean, would ultimately turn Persia's numerical superiority into a liability. Xerxes, overconfident from his initial victories, faced unexpectedly organized resistance, culminating in the Greek victory at the Battle of Salamis later that year, a triumph that owed much to the time Thermopylae had afforded the defenders. Politically, Thermopylae elevated the stature of Sparta while also fostering a rare sense of pan-Hellenic unity. Sparta's sacrifice demonstrated leadership not only in military skill but in moral authority. Other city-states, inspired by the courage displayed, began to cooperate more actively, setting aside rivalries for the moment to confront a common existential threat. Athens and Sparta, historically wary of each other, found in the Persian threat a unifying cause, albeit temporarily, that would influence diplomatic interactions for decades. The legend of Thermopylae became a moral touchstone, illustrating that courage and sacrifice could shape the geopolitical landscape as profoundly as armies themselves. Culturally and socially, the battle's resonance was profound. Thermopylae became a symbol of ultimate self-sacrifice and duty to one's community. Poets, historians, and storytellers immortalized the event. Herodotus' Histories recorded the battle not merely as a military engagement, but as an ethical exemplar. Courage against insurmountable odds, discipline against chaos, and moral leadership in the face of death. Later Greek dramatists would draw on these themes, embedding Thermopylae in literature, theater, and civic education. Even monuments erected in later centuries, such as the modern memorial at Thermopylae, echo the enduring reverence for those who fought and died. Economically, the Persian invasion and the resistance at Thermopylae had indirect consequences. Cities abandoned by their populations experienced temporary disruption of trade and agriculture. Yet, the delay allowed key economic centers, particularly in central Greece, to secure resources and organize logistics for continued resistance. The message was clear. Strategic sacrifice can preserve the long-term integrity of a society, even at great immediate cost. Militarily, Thermopylae became a case study in terrain exploitation, force multiplication, and the psychology of warfare. The battle demonstrated that a smaller, well-disciplined force could delay a much larger opponent through careful positioning, cohesion, and morale management. Generals and military scholars from antiquity to modern times have cited the Spartan stand as a prime example of defensive warfare in constrained terrain. It also emphasized the importance of intelligence. The eventual betrayal by Ephialtes illustrated the vulnerability of even the most strategic positions to human treachery. Thermopylae's long-term legacy extends into the realm of what-ifs. Had the Spartans failed to hold the pass even temporarily, the Persian advance might have overwhelmed Greece before adequate defensive measures could be implemented. A swift conquest of Athens could have allowed Persia to establish a dominant foothold in Europe, potentially altering the development of Western civilization. The preservation of Greek independence enabled the flowering of classical culture, philosophy, democracy, art, and science, which in turn shaped the trajectory of European thought for millennia. The Spartans' sacrifice, therefore, was not merely a tactical delay. It was a fulcrum upon which the balance of history turned. Visual cues for exploring Thermopylae's long-term impact can be immersive. One can visualize rebuilt city-states bustling with commerce, fortified walls still standing as testimony to preparation, fleets assembling in harbors, and trade routes gradually reopening after Persian incursions. Monuments and inscriptions commemorate the fallen, while maps can animate the shifting political landscape, from fragmented city-states to a more cohesive Greek front, capable of confronting and eventually repelling the Persian threat. illustrations of the battle's cultural influence, from dramatic performances to later historical narratives, show how Thermopylae transcended the physical battlefield to occupy the collective memory of a civilization. Ultimately, Thermopylae illustrates a profound principle. The impact of courage and strategy often extends far beyond immediate outcomes. A handful of determined defenders altered the operational calculus of an empire, inspired unity among divided polities, and ensured that Greek culture would survive to influence future generations. The battle's resonance has persisted for over 2 millennia, informing military doctrine, ethical discussions on leadership and sacrifice, and the narrative of human resilience. It stands as a timeless testament to the idea that even the smallest number of committed individuals, when guided by skill, foresight, and purpose, can shape the course of history. Thermopylae, though a tactical defeat, stands as a monument to strategy, courage, and human endurance. The battle distilled timeless lessons that resonate far beyond the rocky pass where Leonidas and his 300 Spartans made their final stand. It was not merely the clash of armies, but the collision of principles, discipline versus overwhelming numbers, unity versus empire, courage versus inevitability. The first lesson is the power of terrain and preparation. The Spartans demonstrated that knowledge of the battlefield, combined with disciplined execution, can neutralize even vast numerical superiority. Narrow passes, fortified positions, and well-timed maneuvers transformed 300 men into a force capable of holding an empire at bay. Modern military strategists still study Thermopylae as an archetype of defensive warfare, illustrating how careful planning and spatial awareness amplify human and technological advantage. Second, leadership and morale proved decisive. Leonidas's presence, unwavering resolve, and ultimate sacrifice galvanized not only his men but the broader Greek populace. Leadership in Thermopylae was not measured by the orders given, but by the example set. The courage to confront death with clarity and purpose inspired others to act decisively. It underscores a universal truth across eras: morale, trust, and respect can outweigh sheer numerical strength. Third, Thermopylae exemplifies the profound impact of sacrifice for a greater cause. Each Spartan and allied soldier knew the likely outcome yet fought anyway, transforming personal loss into collective gain. Their stand delayed the Persian advance, providing time for Athens and other city-states to prepare defenses, ultimately altering the course of the war. Sacrifice in this context became a strategic tool, demonstrating that the willingness to endure hardship can have ripple effects far beyond immediate survival. The battle also reveals the unpredictable interplay of intelligence and human factors. While the Spartans maximized terrain and discipline, the betrayal by Ephialtes illustrates the vulnerability of even the most formidable strategies to unforeseen variables. Human decisions, loyalties, and misjudgments can shift the balance, emphasizing that warfare is as much about psychology and trust as it is about weaponry and formations. Culturally, Thermopylae forged a narrative that has endured through millennia. It is a story of courage, leadership, and moral fortitude that transcends the battlefield. Its legacy shaped Greek identity, inspiring unity in the face of existential threat, and its lessons reverberate in leadership studies, literature, and modern military doctrine. The battle's resonance underscores a timeless truth: acts of valor, even in apparent defeat, can define societies, inspire generations, and influence the trajectory of history itself. In modern terms, Thermopylae invites reflection on leadership under pressure, strategic decision-making, and ethical resolve. It illustrates that true effectiveness is not measured solely by immediate victory but by long-term impact. Whether in military, political, or personal contexts, the principles evident at Thermopylae, discipline, preparation, courage, and sacrifice, remain relevant. Leaders who act decisively, inspire trust, and leverage strategic advantages can achieve results that transcend apparent limitations. Visually, a reflective narrative over panoramic shots of the past can encapsulate these lessons. The sun sets over jagged cliffs, casting long shadows over monuments marking Spartan graves. Maps display the Greek defensive network following Thermopylae, and cinematic overlays illustrate the ripple effect on Salamis and Plataea. Statues, plaques, and modern memorials remind viewers that the lessons of courage, sacrifice, and strategy endure, inviting contemplation of both history and the qualities needed to confront contemporary challenges. Thermopylae, then, is more than a story of soldiers against an empire. It is a blueprint for resilience, a meditation on leadership, and a testament to the enduring human capacity to confront overwhelming odds with discipline, purpose, and honor. Its echoes are felt in military academies, ethical discussions, and cultural narratives worldwide, a timeless lesson that even against insurmountable odds, preparation, unity, and courage can define the course of history.